Hello and welcome to the Freelancers Tea Break, the short and sweet podcast you can enjoy whilst you're making a cuppa. I'm your host, Emma Cossey, and this is the podcast for anyone who is already freelance or is thinking about going freelance. Let's talk about how to respond to people when they ask you to work for free. So this can come up in a variety of different ways. It can come up as, do you mind coming and doing this test project? And then if it works out, we will see if we've got budget in the future. Or can you come and do this talk? Unfortunately, we don't have a budget. Could you do, we're interested in working with you, but we want to see how you work. So could, as a copywriter, you do a 5-page example of what you do? And it's slightly less common now because people are wising up to the fact that it is quite rude to ask creatives in particular to work for free. You would never go ask a hairdresser for an example haircut just to check that you're happy with them, with their work, or you wouldn't go to a plumber and say, could you just install this toilet just so I can see if we want to invest in your services in the future. But I want to talk about some of the options you've got if somebody does approach you with an option for working for free. The first one is the most important one. You can decline. As your freelance fairy godmother, I give you full permission to decline free work. You absolutely do not have to do it. They can say that it will be good for your portfolio. It will be good for exposing you to more people. Exposure, I hate the exposure thing because it doesn't pay the bills. And if they want to expose you to their audience, they can do that whilst paying you. So you can absolutely decline that. There are polite ways of doing that. You can go back and say, thanks for getting in touch. Unfortunately, I only have room at the moment for paid clients, but do get in touch if you do happen to have a budget in the future. You can also redirect them to other tools that you might have. So I found that there were certain things that people were approaching me about, and there were things that I wouldn't necessarily do a whole coaching session on or a whole training session on, but I had it repeatedly, and it wasn't necessarily something that people were ready to invest a lot of money in. So in those situations, I thought, well, why don't I create some kind of resource that gets people on my mailing list? So it could be like a PDF or a very short training, or an audio feed or anything like that. Something very short and sweet, which you can send to them. So they kind of get something for free, but it means that you get something back in terms of getting more people on your mailing list. So anything like that, if you find you're getting something regularly and it doesn't feel like enough to offer as a service, then it might be worth doing some kind of taster version of it. You can also do it as a taster version, a short version, and then upsell at the end for something that's paid. But if you find you're regularly getting something that doesn't really quite work as a full service, then maybe that's an option, that you have it as either a free or a small, lower cost course. So that could be another option as well. If they want to see a demonstration of your work, they call it spec work. I hate it. If they want to see an example of your work by you producing something for them, I would recommend that they have a look at your portfolio or your testimonials, because that's what that's there for. If they want a piece of work as an example and they want it to be like a custom piece of work for them, then they need to pay for that. And you can say, I do paid spec work. So if you wanted to let me know, we can book that in and I can do an example. And then if you're happy, we can move forward. But there's no reason now for them to be doing it unpaid. I find it particularly frustrating when I see people approach copywriters doing that, because copywriters usually have social media and websites showing their writing style and showing what client work they've done. You can already see how their writing style is. Same for photography and anything like that. So you can point them towards a free resource you might have. You can point them towards a testimonial. You may find that there is a payoff. So for me, I do speak at local networking groups, not big events, but just smaller local event network groups. I have no problem with doing that. Usually I've got a great relationship with the person that hosts it. They're very good at sending people my way. So I'm more than happy to sort of go up and do a 15-20 minute talk. Also, from a laziness point of view, doing a talk at a networking event is a fantastic way to get your message across to the entire room without having to network with the entire room. So I don't personally mind doing that as much. I think also it does depend on, like if you're going on a radio station, for example, and talking about something, that's PR rather than free work. And also you're not necessarily always telling them everything you're doing and giving people a free service. Usually you're talking about something and then they book in with you if they want to do a more in-depth version of it. It also might be that if you're doing an event, like now, if I was doing a talk, I would ask if I can take some of my books along, as I now have a book, to see if I can sell some of them there. So that will be a really good way of marketing and promoting my book. Again, if it's a big event and they're charging for tickets and it's a large chunk of the money, then I think speakers should be paid, because they are going up there, especially as they're often going up there with slides and preparation, and they're doing a lot in the run-up. You should be paid for your time. But yeah, if there is a way where you can collect email addresses or be able to sell your products if you have any, or perhaps they might do something like, if they've got a social media channel, they might promote your services on their social media channel as part of the deal. I would make sure you get any of this written down so that it's not something that they just mention and never happens. It's really important to have a contract, even if it is free work. And there's also the option of skill swaps. So this is something I have seen which works really well. Say a photographer and a makeup artist, they might do a skill swap together. So they might, especially if they are early on starting out, they might work together. They might bring on a model as well, and then they will do the makeup, the photos, and the model will get the work as well. So at the end of it, none of them are doing better than anyone else because none of them are getting paid. But the model gets shots for her portfolio, the makeup artist gets shots for their portfolio, and the photographer gets shots for their portfolio. So that can be mutually beneficial. But I think the only thing I would say with skill swaps is be very clear on the outcome. So I have seen it happen quite often where, because they're doing a skill swap, they don't have a contract or anything like that in place. And one of the people might provide the services really quickly, but the other one, because it's a skill swap, might not prioritize it to be as quick as the other person. And then someone's waiting for someone else because unpaid work doesn't take as much of a precedence as paid work can. So it's very important to still have clear ideas. And if you feel like that might go that way, it's just better if you just pay each other. Even if it's the same amount, it's still better to do that than be sort of wishy-washy and have one person feeling really frustrated. So there are lots and lots of ways that you can approach this, but I would be very cautious about saying yes unless there was a big benefit for you. And exposure, rarely, unless it's to a huge audience, and if it is to a huge audience, you should be charging anyway. It's rarely that useful. The funniest ones I see are where very small businesses will approach a freelancer who has someone on Instagram has like 3 times the amount of followers they have, and they'll say, "Oh, we want to work with you for exposure, so you can get exposure from this." And you're like, "Well, how have you found me?" You found me because you've seen I've got a very good following and my content's engaging. So maybe I don't need the exposure. That's very catty. I'm being very catty now. But basically what I'm saying is exposure is a word that gets chucked around a lot. But you deserve to be paid for your time. One more caveat I would say is there is a difference between being asked to do your services for free and being asked to speak about a particular topic. So like I'm thinking when people go on podcast episodes, this kind of all falls into PR and marketing. So it might be you talk about something and people get to know you and connect with you, and then they're going to more like to work with you. That is slightly different from somebody asking someone to come into their company and do a talk on this or do a training session or a workshop. I think a conversation is sometimes different from that. But also, you've got to be careful that conversation isn't a strategy session in disguise. So that was quite a lot to get through there. But yeah, I just wanted to basically share some of the things that you can say if somebody asks you for free, work for free. The TLDR here is you can absolutely say no if you want to. And if you are going to do it, make sure that it's something that really adds value for you. So I hope you found that useful, and I hope you have a wonderful freelance week.